CTV, which is owned by Bell Media, one of the largest companies in this country, laid off, I think it was 1,300 staff, if I read that correctly, 6% of their workforce, including shutting down or selling 9 radio stations and letting go some big names in there. I mean, they're closing their offices in LA and Washington and London. I think they're going down to one person in Washington. They laid off Glenn McGregor and Joyce Napier, who were their on-camera talent in Ottawa. That's incredible that a multi-billion-dollar company like that can't make a go of it, despite hundreds of millions of dollars of subsidies. Why are you able to make a go of it, but mighty Bell Canada can't?
I think there are a few reasons there. And one, and I don't want to understate it, is the technical aspect. Anyone that's ever walked into a traditional newsroom, especially in TV and radio, knows they're very large. They have a number of staff there on dealing with technical issues, on production and on-air people. And, you know, for example, when I was in Calgary for the Alberta election, True North had a little station. Rebel had a station. I think we had, 4 people running our show. And then you look over and Global has riser after riser after riser they all took a group photo after about 40 people that were there to do that. And I think that in general, independent media has come about without money. We all started doing it because we loved doing it. I mean, you started blogging. I don't think you made a dime off of it for years. I remember when you started Rebel in your living room, I started blogging, and I think I actually lost money because I had to buy the domain name and the hosting. But I think in doing that, it's a passion project. And independent media exists not because they were started as businesses, but because the business came about as a way to facilitate what those of us in this space wanted to do. And that passion, I think, translates to a passion that exists in the audience as well. And that brings us to the second part, which is the actual business model, is that our business model is based entirely off of support from people that value the work that we do. And in some cases, advertising is like that, but not in the same direct way. If people think we've lost our way, they're going to cancel their subscriptions. If people like what we're doing, they're going to donate to us. And it's a way to make sure that we're always relevant, which goes to the content that I feel is missing from a lot of what the legacy media is putting out.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 40 people for Global News, and I don't know if you're exaggerating. That's an enormous
they did a
number.
group photo at the end, and there were 40 people, maybe 36, but in that range.
I don't even know how you could do that. And I acknowledge that if we had 40 people working on this program right now, I mean, I wouldn't even be able to come up with jobs for 40 people to do.
One person to check the thermostat, one person to give you a glass of water. It's how would you? Well, I don't know how many people I don't know if I could even accommodate 10 on this show that I do.
I mean, I used to work for Sun News Network a decade ago when there were 200 people in the whole company, and it's true. They had a sound guy in the studio. They had a teleprompter roller. They had a makeup artist or two. Yeah, they had though, but. One of the reasons Sun News failed is it couldn't make a go of it economically. I think that instead of starting with, well, what do we really need to make a go of it? They said, well, how were we doing it before? Let's just trim it a little bit instead of sort of a zero-based approach. And they just thought, well, we'll just keep getting bailouts, or we'll just keep getting bailout either from our corporate owner or from the government. I don't know. I just don't think that this show, which is being put on by really 2 or 3 people, would be 10 times better if 40 people were doing it. I acknowledge that Global News production value is better than ours, but is it 10 times better? I don't believe it is. And I don't think it has 10 times the audience either.
No, and I mean, just to give a funny story about CTV specifically, years ago when I was doing my old radio show in London, my wife and I were going to dinner one night, and as we were driving to the restaurant, I saw there was this massive, massive fire that was on one of the streets of this complex. And, being an intrepid journalist, I pulled over and said, okay, well, we've got some time. We can go to dinner later. Let me report on this. And I started filming it and sending footage back to my newsroom, and they were posting it up on Facebook and Twitter. And there was a CTV journalist there who was a renowned CTV journalist in London, Ontario, who was standing around doing nothing because his camera guy hadn't showed up yet. And I was thinking, well, you have an iPhone. Why do you need a camera guy? You are the camera guy.
Yeah.
And it's those little things that I think speak to that dynamic you've just described, which is this idea of how do we make do with what we have versus if we were to start from bottom up, forget everything we know about media, what would we create? And a great example of this is COVID. When the lockdowns came in and you weren't even allowed to have people in a studio, what did the legacy media outlets do? They all started doing things that True North had been doing and Rebel had been doing for years by then, and saying, oh, how do we get people with cameras in their home? And how do we get people connected remotely? And how do we use home internet? And no, the quality is not identical to that you're going to get in studio with tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment. But it's about that question that you asked there of how much more do you get out of spending $1 million versus $100,000, to use your own studio renovation as an example.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest, either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.